So Mary was a very, very passionate about her faith. Okay, so she was what we would call a devout Catholic. So to be devout meant she had a deep religious commitment to her faith. And she wanted the entire country to follow Catholicism. So she was very brutal in her efforts to bring this about. Now, we know that the Tudors in general were quite brutal based on our crime and punishment unit that we looked at. So she actually imprisoned Protestant leaders and churchmen. And as a result, she burnt them at the stake. So they were burned alive. And this warranted her the nickname Bloody Mary, which is what you might more famously know her as. Now, she died in 1558 at the age of 42 after she fell ill, and she had actually written a will, and in this will, she had consented to passing the crown to her half-sister Elizabeth. Now, with her dying words, Mary said that she'd hoped Elizabeth would continue to promote the Catholic faith in England. However, Elizabeth was a Protestant. So it's between the reigns of Mary and Elizabeth we start to go back and forth, with England going from being a Catholic country to a Protestant country. Now, I want you to pause the screen and have a think. Do you think Elizabeth honoured her half-sister's wishes? So Elizabeth, when she came to the throne, was faced with a dilemma. Okay? So she herself was committed to the Protestant faith that she was brought up to believe in. However, a large part of the population were Catholic, and she needed to make sure that the Catholic Church and the public supported her decisions. So, pause the screen, have a think. What would you now do if you were in Elizabeth's current situation? So Elizabeth republished the English translation of the Bible. So she brought back the Church of England, which obviously her father, Henry VIII, had established, and she made it compulsory, so you had to attend church. And just like her father, she fined people that did not attend these services. However, she was quite tolerant of other religious views, so she wasn't against other people having religious views. And she believed that Catholicism and Protestantism were both essentially part of the same faith, so part of the Christianity faith. And she was famous for saying, "There is only one Christ, Jesus, one faith. All else is a dispute over trifles." Have a pause and think, what do you think she means by this? So Elizabeth was more lenient towards religions and helped to calm the unrest of England at that point in time, because the swap between the different faiths caused quite an upset with the British people. However, in Scotland, Elizabeth's cousin, Mary Queen of Scots, was having a much more difficult time ruling her own country. Now, she was a Catholic, but many of her nobles were Protestants, and they didn't always support and believe in the decisions that she made. As a result, this caused further upset when she then went and married a man who they didn't approve of. So in 1568, she fled to England to seek help and sympathy from her cousin Elizabeth. Have a pause. How do you think Elizabeth reacted to Mary's arrival in England? So Elizabeth was warned by her advisors to be wary of Mary. She was a very strict Catholic, and with a claim to the English throne, so she was entitled to the throne that Queen Elizabeth currently had at that point in time. Some believed that she was actually a stronger potential ruler than Elizabeth. Therefore, she was seen as a threat. So when she arrived, Mary was placed under house arrest and was watched very, very closely by Elizabeth's spies. So she was effectively a prisoner in England for almost 20 years. So here is a portrait of her painted in 1578 while she was currently under the house arrest. Have a pause the video and think, how might Elizabeth have felt about having a potential enemy close to her? Have a think about how that might make you feel, knowing that there is someone there potentially who could overthrow you and steal your crown, but is also a blood relative. So this was one of the other challenges that she had to overcome. So obviously her sister had obviously had the claim to the throne, and now she's got the threat of her cousin potentially overthrowing her for the crown as well. So in 1586, evidence was actually found that Mary was involved in a Catholic plot to overthrow Queen Elizabeth. Now, we know that when you try to overthrow the crown or you do anything against the crown and its rule, you are tried for high treason. So she was tried for treason and she was found guilty and sentenced to death. However, Elizabeth was reluctant to sign her cousin's death warrant. So she didn't actually want to execute her cousin. Maybe she had a change of heart because she knew that the person she'd be executing was a family member. And she'd actually then put it off for 4 months, and something changed, and she finally agreed to the execution. The two women, however, in her entire imprisonment under house arrest, had actually never met face to face. So here is a picture of an artist rendition of what Mary's execution might have looked like. And this was actually based on eyewitness accounts. This is actually a secondary resource here. So some accounts from eyewitnesses said that Mary's dog had hidden under the skirts during the execution and could not be made to leave the body of his mistress after her death. So obviously the dog didn't want to then be apart from her mistress. So this is a painting rendition based on eyewitness accounts. Now I want you to pause the video and have a think. Why do you think Elizabeth might have been reluctant to have Mary killed? Imagine if that was you in your position and you'd have to kill a family member. Have a think about why you'd be reluctant to do that. So, I want you to pause the screen and have a good think about what you've learned about the life and decisions of Queen Elizabeth. Okay, so we know she's had to overcome the challenge of the claim to the throne from her sister and her cousin. Obviously, we also know that one of the other challenges she had to overcome was the gender politics. Based on all of the previous rulers, it was very much a male-dominated country. It was very patriarchal. So patriarchal means it was controlled by men. And obviously, women at that time were deemed to be incapable of ruling. So if you were ruled by a female, then it means that your country would be weak and therefore would be easy to overthrow or challenge within a war. And one of the other things that she had to overcome was the fact that when she took over the country, it was currently in the places of bankruptcy. So it was pushing on the verge of having to claim itself bankrupt. And obviously, Queen Mary had punished many people based on their religion. And one of the other challenges that she was overcome with was the pressure for her to marry and to produce an heir. So I want you to have a think about these decisions that she's made. What do these events and how does she deal with them tell you about the type of person she was as an individual person and her position as the Queen? So just to finish off this lesson, Elizabeth I actually never married in the end. So despite that pressure from her noblemen and the government, she never married. She never bowed down to the pressure of finding herself a husband. She had had several offers and there were several choices. So here are some of the things that she said about marriage. I would rather be a beggar and single than a queen and married. I do not want a husband who honours me as a queen if he does not love me as a woman. And I am already bound unto a husband, which is the kingdom of England. So have a think. What do you think Elizabeth's reasons were for not getting married? So here are some of the possible reasons. She might have found that she was happy to rule by herself and therefore did not need a man to be able to share her power with or even try to overthrow her and rule himself. Also, choosing to marry one Englishman over many other possible suitors, so other different options, could cause them to become jealous and rebellious, which obviously she doesn't want to cause her a problem further down the line. A foreign husband, so somebody from abroad, might try and make decisions that were against the interests of England, so therefore there would be a conflict of interest. And she could also have been afraid that once people knew who the heir would be, they would prefer that person to her and try and overthrow her. So those might be just some of the reasons that she might have decided she didn't want to get married. So what I would like you to do now is I would like you to complete the tasks that are written on the document and have a go yourself.